I met Nathan on the first day of freshman orientation at Riverbank University. I remember the way the sun streamed through the trees as we stood awkwardly in the quad, surrounded by other nervous first years. I was feeling lost, clutching a folder of orientation materials, and wondering if anyone here would even notice me. But Nathan noticed. "Hey," he said, stepping up beside me, his smile easy and open. "Are you as overwhelmed as I am?" I laughed, relieved to find someone who seemed as out of place as I felt. "Definitely. I didn't expect college to feel this chaotic." He nodded, pushing his dark hair out of his eyes. "Yeah, I thought it would be more like, I don't know, a movie or something, but this is just a lot." From that moment, Nathan and I became fast friends. We were both majoring in fields that required a lot of time and focus, he in mechanical engineering and me in digital marketing. So we quickly bonded over late-night study sessions, where we shared stories about our lives, our families, and our hopes for the future. He was serious about his studies, and that's something I admired about him. I thought his determination made him strong, focused. I didn't realize back then how narrow his view of life really was. The first few months of our relationship were what people call the honeymoon phase. Everything felt light and easy, as if we were floating on air. We spent every weekend together, either going to movies or hiking on the trails near campus. Nathan was attentive, always finding small ways to make me smile, like leaving sticky notes with little doodles in my textbooks or surprising me with coffee when I had an early morning class. He had this way of making me feel like I was the center of his world, and I loved that. I remember one weekend in particular, when we had gone hiking in the hills just outside the city. It was late fall, and the leaves were just starting to turn. Nathan brought a small picnic for us to enjoy at the top of the hill. A simple meal of sandwiches and fruit, but it felt like the most romantic gesture in the world at the time. We sat on a blanket, looking out over the valley, and he took my hand. "I want us to always have moments like this," he said, his voice soft. "Just the two of us, away from everything else." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Me too. This is perfect." At that moment, I believed it. I believed that we would always have these moments of peace, where the rest of the world faded away and it was just the two of us, side by side. But life doesn't work that way, does it? Peaceful moments are fleeting, and the real world always finds a way to intrude. It wasn't long before the cracks in our relationship began to show. They started small. So small I didn't even notice them at first. Nathan would make little comments here and there about how I spent my time, or who I spent it with. At first, it was subtle, almost caring in tone. "I just miss you when you're out with your friends," he'd say. "I want to spend more time with you." I thought it was sweet. At first, I wanted to spend time with him too, so I started saying no to some of the group outings with my friends. I didn't think much of it, just a small compromise for the sake of the relationship. But then, the comments became more pointed. "Why do you need to go out with him so often? Don't you think you're kind of neglecting us?" I would feel a twinge of guilt when he said things like that, even though I knew I wasn't neglecting him. I was balancing my relationship with my friendships, my studies, in my own time. But somehow, that wasn't enough for Nathan. The real turning point came when I started working on a major group project for one of my marketing courses. It was a semester-long endeavor, and my team had decided to put in some extra late-night sessions as the deadline approached. We were designing a full digital campaign for a mock client, and every detail had to be perfect. "I don't understand why you have to spend all night working on this," Nathan said one evening as I was getting ready to head out. His arms were crossed, and his tone was sharper than usual. "It's just for the project, Nathan," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "You know how important this is for my grade." "But why does it have to be all night? Can't you do some of it from home?" I sighed, frustrated. "It's a group project. We need to work together, and we have to get it done before the deadline. It's not something I can just put off." Nathan didn't seem convinced, but he didn't say anything more as I left. That night, I felt a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't shake. For the first time, I started to wonder if Nathan's concern wasn't about the project at all, but about control. A few weeks later, the project was finally done, and my friends and I decided to celebrate with a night out at a local bar. It was the first time in weeks that I had allowed myself to relax, and I was looking forward to it. I texted Nathan before heading out, letting him know about our plans. He didn't respond right away, but I figured he was busy with his own studies and didn't think much of it. The night started off great, laughing with my friends, sharing drinks, and dancing without a care in the world. But as the night wore on, I noticed the absence of any messages from Nathan. Usually, he would send at least a quick "good night" or "miss you." But tonight, there was nothing. It wasn't until after midnight that my phone finally buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Nathan, but what I saw made my stomach drop. It was a call. Confused, I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. "Hello?" What I heard next made my blood run cold. Moans. Loud, unmistakable sounds of intimacy, followed by a familiar voice, Nathan's voice. "I wanted you to hear what you're missing," he said, his tone cold and distant. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening, but I couldn't make sense of it. Was this a joke? Some kind of sick prank? But then I heard the woman's voice in the background, and the reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. Nathan wasn't alone. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I don't remember how I got home, or what I said to my friends. All I knew was that everything had changed. The Nathan I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who had deliberately chosen to hurt me in the cruelest way possible. When I finally confronted him the next day, Nathan tried to brush it off as a moment of weakness. "I was angry," he said. "I felt like you were slipping away, like you didn't care about us anymore. I didn't know how else to make you understand." His words were hollow, empty. How could he think that what he had done would make me understand anything other than the fact that he didn't respect me? "I trusted you," I said, my voice shaking with the weight of my anger and hurt. "I loved you, and this is how you repay that? By cheating on me? By humiliating me?" Nathan had no real answer for that. He just stood there, staring at the floor, as if he didn't know what to say. Maybe he didn't. I left that day, walking away from the relationship that had once felt so full of promise. But even though I had ended things with Nathan, the pain lingered. It would take time to heal, time to rebuild the pieces of myself that had been broken by his betrayal. After the breakup, I found myself leaning on my friends and family more than ever. Jessica, my best friend, was the first person I called after the confrontation with Nathan. She had always been there for me, through every high and low, and this time was no different. Jessica didn't sugarcoat her advice. "You know he's a manipulator, right? This wasn't just about the cheating. He wanted to control you. He's been doing it all along." Her words stung, but deep down, I knew she was right. Nathan's behavior had always been about control, about making sure I prioritized him above everything else. I had just been too blinded by love to see it. My sister, Emily, was equally blunt when I told her what had happened. "You deserve better than that," she said, her voice full of conviction. "You deserve someone who respects you, who values you for who you are, not someone who tries to control every aspect of your life." Their words gave me strength, but they also forced me to confront a painful truth. I had lost myself in my relationship with Nathan. I had let him dictate how I spent my time, who I saw, and what I did. And in doing so, I had forgotten who I was. In the weeks that followed, I took time to reflect on my relationship with Nathan and what I had allowed to happen. It wasn't easy. There were days when I questioned whether I had made the right decision in ending things, especially when the loneliness crept in. But deep down, I knew that staying with Nathan would have only caused me more pain in the long run. I started journaling, writing down my thoughts and feelings in an attempt to make sense of everything. I wrote about the good times, the bad times, and everything in between. But most of all, I wrote about the ways in which I had compromised my own happiness for the sake of the relationship. I had given up so much of myself to make Nathan happy, to keep the peace, to avoid conflict. But in doing so, I had lost sight of what I really wanted and needed. I had lost sight of my own worth. One evening, as I was flipping through the pages of my journal, I came across a quote that struck a chord with me. "You can't lose yourself in the pursuit of someone else's happiness." It was a simple truth, but it was one that I had forgotten. I had been so focused on making Nathan happy that I had neglected my own needs and desires. And now, it was time to change that. After weeks of soul-searching, I came to a decision. I needed to cut all ties with Nathan. I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that he would change, or that we could somehow fix what was broken. The relationship was over, and it was time for me to move on. I wrote a letter to Nathan, explaining my decision. I didn't want to end things out of anger or resentment. I wanted to do it from a place of self-respect and clarity. In the letter, I told him how much I had loved him, how much I had wanted our relationship to work. But I also told him that I deserved better. I deserved a partner who respected me, who trusted me, and who valued my independence. I hope you find what you're looking for, I wrote at the end of a letter. But I can't be the person who gives it to you. Sending that letter was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was also one of the most empowering. It was a way of reclaiming my power, my voice, and my worth. The weeks and months that followed the breakup were a time of healing and growth. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I had learned from my relationship with Nathan and how I could use those lessons to create a healthier, more fulfilling life for myself. I reconnected with old friends I had distanced myself from during my time with Nathan. I threw myself into my studies, working hard to excel in my digital marketing program, and I started taking time for myself, doing the things that made me happy, that brought me joy. I also started dating again, but this time, I was much more careful about who I let into my life. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me or to fill a void. I was looking for someone who would compliment me, who would respect me for who I was. And slowly but surely, I began to feel whole again. Looking back on my relationship with Nathan, I can see now how much I grew from the experience. It wasn't easy. It was one of the most painful periods of my life, but it taught me valuable lessons about love, trust, and self-worth. If I could go back and talk to my past self, the girl who was so deeply in love with Nathan, I would tell her this: love should never make you feel small. It should never make you question your worth or your independence. You deserve a love that lifts you up, that supports you, that allows you to be your truest self. Don't settle for anything less. And with those words in mind, I move forward, ready to embrace whatever the future holds, with a clearer sense of who I am and what I deserve. Imagine being 18, standing at a crossroads where your future stretches out in front of you, but instead of excitement, you feel weighed down by responsibilities you never asked for. This is my story, one of love, sacrifice, and the battle to reclaim my own life. It all started when my sister was born, a sister who, through no fault of her own, changed everything. My life wasn't the same after she arrived, and though I loved her, the expectations placed on me began to suffocate me. For years, I was a caregiver, a second parent, a shadow in my own family. But today, I stand on the cusp of something new, my chance to be free. When my sister was born, I was 6 years old. At that age, I was thrilled to be a big sister. I thought it meant I would have a new playmate, someone to look after and teach things to. But what I didn't realize was that I was the one who would vanish. My parents' attention shifted entirely to her. She was diagnosed with severe autism, and everything in our family's life revolved around her. Slowly, I started to fade into the background, overlooked and forgotten. At first, I didn't mind. I was a kid who just wanted to help. But the more I tried to be there for her, the more I lost pieces of myself. One of the earliest changes was that I was moved into the basement. My sister needed to be close to my parents, and that meant I had to move. The basement was cold, dark, and lonely. I could hear the rest of my family upstairs, laughing or talking, while I lay alone in that dim room. I missed the warmth of being near them, of feeling like part of the family. Nights down there felt endless. My world was shrinking, and I was slowly realizing that my needs didn't seem to matter anymore. Then, there were the toys. My sister didn't mean to break them, but she did, often. Every time one of my things was destroyed, it felt like a little more of my childhood was being taken from me. I would tell my parents how much it hurt, how unfair it felt, hoping they would at least acknowledge my feelings. But every time, they brushed it off. "She's younger. She doesn't understand," they'd say. "You're the big sister. You need to be more understanding." I tried to be, but it didn't stop the hurt from piling up. It felt like, in their eyes, I was just supposed to endure everything without complaint. The final straw came with the MacBook incident. I had earned that laptop from school because of my good grades. It was something I was proud of, something that felt like it was mine. But one day, it was destroyed by my sister. I didn't even get a chance to defend myself. My school was angry. My parents blamed me for being careless, and no one stopped to consider that it wasn't my fault. I was furious. It wasn't just about the laptop. It was about feeling like no one had my back, ever. Balancing life as a sister and trying to have my own life was impossible. I love my sister, I do, but I'm still just a teenager. Every time she needed something, I had to drop everything, no matter what. Studying, hanging out with friends, or even just trying to relax, it didn't matter. It felt like I was always on call, 24/7, without ever agreeing to it. I could barely remember the last time I hung out with my friends without constantly checking my phone, afraid that home would need me to rush back. One day, I decided I needed a break. My friend Jake and I had been planning to watch the new Spider-Man movie. I was excited, and for the first time in a long time, I wanted to enjoy something just for myself. So, I made a choice. I turned my phone off for the 2 hours I was in the theater. I wanted to disconnect and just enjoy being a teenager. But the moment I turned my phone back on after the movie, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Missed calls, angry texts. My mom was furious, telling me they'd needed me an hour ago. I rushed home, guilt weighing heavily on me, but also with a bubbling anger. I just wanted a couple of hours to myself. Was that really too much to ask? When I got home, it was like walking into a storm. My parents were furious. They accused me of abandoning my responsibilities, of being irresponsible. I tried to explain, but it didn't matter. They grounded me, and I sat in my room, feeling more trapped than ever before. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about the movie. It was about feeling stuck in a role I never asked for. Being 18, still feeling like I wasn't allowed to have my own life, was exhausting. I love my sister deeply, but sometimes I felt like my entire identity was wrapped up in being her caretaker. And my parents, well, they didn't seem to notice me unless they needed something done for her. I had become invisible, nothing more than a pair of extra hands to help with her care. One week, though, something changed. I had been chosen to give a speech at a school event. It was a big deal for me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like something was about me. I worked hard on that speech, pouring my heart and soul into it. My parents had promised to come, and I thought maybe, just maybe, this time, things would be different. But they weren't. They missed it. Once again, it was because of something with my sister. Standing on that stage, looking into the crowd and not seeing them there, I felt crushed. I pushed through the speech, but it felt hollow. I walked home that day, tears streaming down my face, realizing that no matter what I did, I would always come second. Then came the joke, one that wasn't funny at all. I had been talking to my dad about college, something I had been excited about. For once, we were discussing my future, not my sister's needs. But then, out of nowhere, he made a joke about choosing a high-paying major so I could take care of my sister when they were gone. He laughed, but to me, it wasn't funny. It was a harsh reminder that my entire life, even my future, was expected to revolve around her. That's when I snapped. All the bottled-up feelings, the resentment, the sadness, it all came pouring out. I yelled, I cried. I told him how unfair it was that I was being forced into this role. But my parents just stared at me, cold and detached, like they didn't understand why I was so upset. I ran to my room, slammed the door, and waited. Hours passed, but no one came to check on me. That was the loneliest I had ever felt. I realized then that I had to do something. I couldn't keep living like this, suffocating under the weight of expectations I never asked for. That night, I made a decision. I packed a bag, texted my grandpa, and left. I needed space to figure out who I was, without the constant pressure to be my sister's caretaker. Staying with my grandpa was eye-opening. It wasn't just about getting away, it was about finally being seen. My grandpa understood. He listened. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was on my side. He encouraged me to think about my own future, to dream about what I wanted to do, not what I felt obligated to do. We talked about college, and for the first time, I could think about majors that interested me, not ones that would make enough money to care for my sister. But the biggest revelation came from him. My grandpa told me something I had never known. My sister was supposed to have professional help that my parents had been neglecting to provide. They had been lying to the family, saying they had hired someone to care for her, even taking money from relatives to pay for this non-existent caregiver. I couldn't believe it. All this time, I had been carrying the weight of caring for her, thinking I had no choice. My grandpa was furious, and so was the rest of my extended family when they found out. They had no idea how much I had been doing, how much my parents had hidden from everyone. Over the next few weeks, my family rallied around me in ways I never expected. My aunts, uncles, and cousins all reached out, offering support, food, and a listening ear. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. For the first time in years, I wasn't just the sister or the caretaker. I was me. My grandpa made sure I had space to just be a teenager again. He encouraged me to hang out with friends, to focus on my future, and to live a life that was mine. When my parents finally called, it wasn't to apologize. They wanted to know when I was coming back home. That was the moment I knew I couldn't return. I had already decided that I was going to college out of state, and my aunt had even offered to send the money directly to me that she used to give to my parents for my sister's care. It was going to be my college fund now. Leaving wasn't easy. Packing up my things, saying goodbye to my mom, who finally broke down and told me she loved me, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But as I settled into my new room at my grandpa's, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was finally making decisions for myself, and it felt freeing. I don't hate my sister. In fact, I love her more than words can say. The anger I once felt was misplaced. It wasn't her fault. She didn't ask for any of this either. But I've come to realize that I deserve to live my own life too. I'm ready to move forward, to explore the world on my own terms. I know there will be challenges, and sometimes I still feel guilty. But I also know that I deserve to be happy, to find my own path. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about what the future holds.